Mills, who will be moderating today's discussion. Shonn is the Global Director for High-Rise in Ramboll, who is based in Singapore. He's an active member of the CTBUH, serving as a member of the boards of trustees with the aim to champion a more sustainable built environment. Take it away, Shonn.
Thanks, Shazlan. And thanks again, everyone, for joining the CTBUH Digital Event number 3 for Future Construction. Go to the next one, Shaz. Just the next slide, Shaz. A little bit of delay, sorry guys. So the wider development and construction industry now recognize the adoption of advanced manufacturing and modular construction as a key part of the construction productivity agenda. And while we've had some amazing success stories, there's still some significant roadblocks for widespread adoption. That said, the future is here now. And with the recent pandemic and accompanying social distancing regulation, it's really starting to pressurize the traditional construction industry. So the question today is now the time to really push for that revolutionary transformation? Go to the next one, Chad. We have a really great panel of experts. Really happy to see these guys today. They're going to share some innovative ideas on the trends for advanced manufacturing and modular construction. Looking forward to hearing from them, but I'm also really looking forward to hearing from you. So please put your questions in the chat. And if you have one you want to ask directly, in the last 5 minutes, we'll open it up to questions from the audience. So next one, Chad. Our first panelist is Iyad Alsaka, partner of Office of Metropolitan Architecture. Iyad is responsible for OMA's work in the Middle East and Africa, and he's led many of OMA's master plan projects, such as the Waterfront City, Alsaka Avenue, which is a new public venue cultural district in Dubai. He is also an architect for one of the Middle East's first high-rise modular projects on Mara Island. Personally, a big fan of Iyad and OMA's body of work, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what you have to say. So Iyad, take it away.
Thank you, Shonn. Next slide, please. This is, as you know, this is the Crystal Palace in Hyde Park in London. Was built in 1851. This is one of the first buildings that every member and component was prefabricated off-site, and all the members are also self-supporting. Next one, please. After the Second World War, Europe and in Asia mainly, they tried very hard to all kind of architectural movement like the Metropolitan, the Argyrou in the UK, and structuralism. They pushed the agenda of modularity and prefabrication to rethink the state, and the society and the construction industry through the kind of modularity and prefabrication. Next one, please. However, after long years of this kind of thinkings and utopias, if you look at the left, this was the 1960 Metropolitan of Alsaka city, and we end up in almost in the 21st century with a stigma about the prefabrication, like almost the whole future is cancelled. When you talk about modularity and prefabrication, people think of only porta cabin, a really negative stigma. Next one, please. We, for the last 10 years at OMA and myself, we have worked in the Middle East, North Africa, and South Asia, and in Europe to research the issue of prefabrication and modularity. We work with the developer, we were commissioned by developer, we work with contractor and fabricators to define what's holding the prefabrication, what's holding modularity. And we almost got to 6 different principles of comparison between what does it mean to do on-site construction and off-site constructions. Issue related to productivity, the training of the workforce, the process of construction, the assembly, labor safety, and the controlled work environments. Next one, please. Takes a bit time. The conclusion that we came to, that the best model that we can adopt is to kind of, instead of define it as a modular or prefabrication, if we can go back to the previous slide, please, is to define it as a construction automation and take the car industry as an example. The car industry, as you know, for example, if you take a VW, if we go back to the previous slide, if you take a VW as an example, VW is responsible about 4 different brands using different standard components of the chassis, the engines, doors, for example, using 3 different tires, they achieve completely 3 different products. And in our research, we worked on the same principle to automate the construction, using in this instance, also 3 different layers of construction to achieve almost endless configurations. Obviously, this tire, when it comes to the construction industry, can become also, it can mutate into 3 or 4 or 5, depends on the level of design or the creativity of the design itself. Next one, please. In ideal condition, for example, we came to the conclusion if the adaptation of a modular or prefabrication was from the inception of the project, and we work directly during the conceptual work with prefabricators and the developer, we can achieve up to almost 55% in the overall program of the development or the life cycle of the development of the project itself. Next one, please. At the same time, we looked at the issue that related to cost, and in instances, if we, for example, in Europe and in the Middle East specifically, if again the project was from the brief of the project, we work directly with fabricators and contractors and the developers, we can up to 30% saving in cost of constructions. And it's all a matter of how to deal with the issue that related to procurement of how to define the project itself. So the benefits are tremendous for developers. Next one, please. That also goes to the issue related to site wastage. So for example, our research show in an area like the Middle East, the site wastage from materiality can go up to 30%. However, in general, we came to the conclusion that to adopt the modular or prefabrication, there is also 5 issues. First, the negative stigma that I highlight at the beginning. There's also a lot of developers see shortage of precedents, and that's make it also a challenge to accept it, specifically in the cycle of the construction, of the actual construction. Procurement strategy is also quite difficult. For example, government agency, they need multiple sources. They cannot deal with direct procurement. Standard and regulations is also a big challenge in different cities and in different municipalities. And one of the other ones that is really crucial is cutting down the cycle of the project time period also shows challenges and how the project can be financed. And my colleagues will speak about more on this more in depth. Next one, please. Finally, we issued a kind of few action, let's say, a few kind of way of thinking that to navigate through how to increase the issue of prefabrication. We think that rebranding the image of prefab based on the quality and the experience that could be a big item on the agenda of architect. Educating the relevant stakeholder is really crucial. Work with government agency to kind of give incentive for the private sector to adopt this system. and also, more importantly, realize successful modular system to be a benchmark for other stakeholders to look at it, and eventually promote the design for manufacturing and assembly process among designers and architects and also students. You know. So in a nutshell, this is our experience. Thank you.
Thanks, Iyad. That was really interesting. I really like the 5-point plan really attacks the problem. So next up, we have Michael Argyrou, founder of Hickory Group. Founded the company in 1991 and has been on a relentless pursuit for the safest and most sustainable solutions in the industry. Now, Michael with UB and Hickory Group was one of the first companies to successfully develop and deliver a high-rise modular product to the market. And it's got an impressive track record, and they're definitely one of the leading companies in innovation of off-site manufacturing and construction. So, Michael, tell us all about it.
Thanks, Shonn, and thanks, Iyad. I got to say, you certainly, the themes, the concepts, the challenges, all of what you discussed in your presentation, we've actually experienced in the application of modular. Our first iteration of modular was in UB, a business that we co-founded, where we were producing essentially volumetric modular buildings, such as you can see on the image there. So essentially a fully fitted out box with all the walls and all the fit out internally. And we built several buildings around Australia using this technology, and they were quite alluring because they went up in a matter of days or weeks, and everybody applauded what we were doing, and it was quite exciting. But there were many, as Iyad mentioned, there were many issues, and there were many obstacles to getting those types of projects approved, accepted by the market, and accepted by the authorities and the financiers, and there were many impediments to the cost and the embedded infrastructure to being able to produce these types of boxes. If we can go to the next slide, please. And I talk about impediments in that cost is important, and whilst modular is perceived to be cheaper, to produce such a box, you really need to establish almost like an automotive plant to be able to produce it. So our fixed overhead almost killed us in that venture. So we ultimately abolished the technology and that business, and we moved to more of a parts system. And I was quite interested actually in Iyad's slide, because he referenced the automotive sector, and essentially that's what we reference now. We look at what the automotive sector have done, and we say, well, what we've got to create are repeatable parts that can build buildings of almost any type. And we've made our system essentially invisible. And what we've created is a structural system that we can fix together on site, and we can add components to that structural system. We can add the components to that structural system in our factory, and we can deliver it to site and then stack the elements on top of each other. And it looks more like a precast concrete floor with a facade on it. If we can go to the next slide, Shez. So essentially those elements, what we then do is we add bathroom pods to it. We can add MEP to those parts, and we stack a building on together. Now, creating standardized parts and a standardized essentially approach to a concrete structure means that we can experiment with a digital infrastructure, with parametric modeling, with a digital infrastructure that can talk to an ERP system in a factory, and that we can automate and can talk to CNC machines and fabrication machines, which ultimately automate a lot of the manufacturing process. Next slide, please, Shez. And our system, we've not only created parts for the horizontal floor system, but we've created essentially prefabricated parts for the vertical elements as well. Now you see there in that element a piece of a concrete core that's going in. Now we manufacture these elements vertically as opposed to horizontally, which is why we're going to manufacture the corners of a precast core. And that's quite significant in that you know, normally if you did that on site in situ, you would have a wet join at the corner because that's where the moment is, and that's expensive and you know, labour intensive. Next slide, please, Shez. Now, by adding all of these parts, or prefabricating all of these parts onto a building site, now we've, by the way, this is, none of what I'm showing you is theory and none of it's conjecture. These are just real life buildings and real life things that we are doing. We've built about a dozen major buildings in Melbourne using this technology. The last one we built was 60 stories tall. The average building is about 30 to 40 floors tall. So they're fairly significant buildings in our CBD of Melbourne. This is essentially what a part looks like. It's a precast concrete floor. It has its set downs in it. It has its risers located and a penetration's already located. Has a bathroom pod. Actually, stay here, Shez. That's okay. Here's a bathroom pod in the model of a bathroom pod. So that's actually a double pod. With the bathroom pods, we actually attach the mechanical, the MEP on top of the bathroom pod, and we put the risers and all the services, we attach it to the back of the bathroom pod. And we install that onto the precast concrete floor, which has a facade attached to it as we install the floor in the building cycle. We also have our prefabricated concrete core system. You can see drawn on the left-hand side, and then our precast concrete floor system. Go to the next slide. When we put all these elements together, actually, we can assemble a floor. We assemble a ball, not we can and not we predict. We actually assemble a floor of a building in roughly 3 to 4 days per floor as a cycle. And we've done this multiple times, and we're doing this actually routinely nowadays. Today, this is a bathroom pod getting lowered into position. It's quite simple. So not only are we assembling floors in sort of 3 to 4 day cycle as complete precast elements, we're doing it with about 30 to 40% of the labour force that is traditionally involved in that process. Now, when I say 30 to 40% of the labour force, in Australian terms, that's quite a low number, because in Australian terms, our labour force on the construction sites probably about 1/2 of what it is in the UK, and much less than what it is in Singapore and parts of Asia. So it is fairly significant. Maybe if we go to the next slide, Shez. So we're achieving a sort of 3 to 4 day floor cycle, very little labour. Since we've been on this journey for about 10 years. There's a bathroom pod actually with a little bit of MEP attached to the top. It's a double pod. It's what you saw in the drawing before. And we manufacture these in our factory in Laverton. Actually, maybe go to the next slide and we'll show you what the factory looks like. We've been on this journey now for about 10 years. We've learnt a lot of things. We've made a lot of mistakes, and it's been a significant investment on the way through. The biggest part of the investment actually was in failing the first time. The first time we failed by producing full volumetric modular, and nowadays our investment actually is quite minimal, because it's a relatively low infrastructure cost considering the size of the operation. I mean, that's our factory. It's about 6 hectares of hard stand. This is where we produce prefabricated bathroom pods, precast elements, and we assemble all of those elements outside, where you can see those gantry cranes, and we put the facades on and assemble it all together. It goes on our trucks and out to site, and we're putting up buildings fairly quickly in Melbourne. This system, I suppose, of assembling buildings and designing and assembling buildings, what we like to call the Hickory way, we've actually exported now to the UK, and I'm not sure if either of the boys on the panel are familiar with what Mace are doing with Mace Technologies, but essentially Mace Technologies are using a Hickory technology to deliver a building. We're successfully doing a building called N06 in London at the moment, and they announced last week that they hit a 4.5 day floor cycle, which apparently in London is quite an achievement. So we're very proud of what the MACE team are doing over there with our technology. So that's where we're at, and we're still learning a great deal, and we're still evolving, and our next generation of our technology comes out in about a month. And in our next generation of our system, we are pre-stressing the floors, and we've essentially totally eliminated in situ concrete from a concrete structure, which means we're assembling a building without any wet trades, without any concrete trucks, and they're going quite quickly. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. What a great story, and I just love to hear the journey you've been on. So go to the next one, Shaz. So our next panelist is Tim Hall from Total Flow. So Tim and Total Flow are pioneering the application of whole system thinking, developing agile business models to transform project delivery. Now, Tim spent 2 years leading Build Offsite, the UK's top network for offsite modular construction. More recently, Tim is supporting the Hong Kong Construction Industry Council in its journey to develop the MIC Innovation Platform. Tim, it's really great to have you with your manufacturing perspective. So tell us what's new in manufacturing.
Okay, thank you, Shonn. Shonn and I are working on a similar project, actually, both in Hong Kong, looking at the modularization of student accommodation, and some of the ideas that come out of that will be part of this session. Shaz, rather than keep saying next, what I'll do is I'll wave every time and try and preempt when we go to the next step. Just tell you a little bit about what we're trying to do as Total Flow. We see ourselves as kind of catalysts and enablers, rather than just the techie manufacturing engineers that we've been of the past. My role in this presentation is not going to be to tell you the what, because Michael and Iyad have already told you what offsite and manufactured solutions are all about. And Michael's experience is really firsthand. He's got some great visuals as part of that. What I'm going to try and do is talk to you about the why would you do it, and how would you, if you're not a manufacturing specialist, embark and engage with people who have some expertise in the area. So in terms of what do we want from construction, you need to be very clear from the outset as to why you want offsite or why you want a manufactured solution. Are we talking about speed, quality, or specification? Some of the early pioneers, the likes of our UK's Ministry of Justice and Heathrow Airport, the reason they wanted offsite was to minimise the number of people on site for security reasons. So you need to have a driver, and you need to be clear what it is you're after, rather than the answer's offsite, I can't think what the question is. Next one, Shaz. Something that Michael made very clear is manufacturers need to invest. And if they invest too much, they end up with a massive overhead burden, which is very difficult to support if the industry is not ready and pulling their solutions forward. So you from a client side perspective, those of you who are clients, need to understand what it is that you want and try and put together that repeated pipeline of work. Otherwise, you end up with a stranded asset of a factory, which is very difficult and very expensive to feed. So our question now is how we deliver the potential of offsite. How do we do it? How do we actually get there? So the next step is to, next one, Shaz. The next one is to move on to try and build an ecosystem. Here we kind of show a linear procurement model, and those of you that love being involved in the construction negotiations of processes between QSs and engineers and designers and all the rest of it, it can be complicated and tortuous, but it's definitely not all about trying to hammer down the costs on procurement. It's also not just about the factory, and the number of transactions between organizations just kills innovation. The vision of the client may not get to the manufacturer, and as Michael will know, if the client doesn't understand what is behind the manufacturing process, they'll make some crazy decisions in the design process. Collaboration is absolutely crucial. It's very easy to say, but actually working together from day one, getting the manufacturer involved at the concept stage with the architect, with the client. What is it you want to achieve? How can we enable you to deliver? That's what's needed. And finding new ways of collaborating rather than transactional procurement models is exactly what we're trying to achieve at Total Flow. And being the catalyst and being rude to the client and saying you need to change the way you operate, and being rude to the manufacturer and say you need to raise your game, fellas, and definitely being rude to the QSs and the contractors, because they need to really change the way they think. So what we need to do is find partners with a common interest. And people need to put skin in the game. It's not a case of I can go and buy my offsite solution from a shop as a one-stop angle. You need to invest to make it work. Brilliant, Shaz. Your timing is excellent. So moving on to the market making, what are we going to try and achieve? So the steps from our total flow perspective, this is how we do it. First of all, we want to define our problem and scope our system. So the MACE construction system that the team are using in the UK, they've done their research. They know they want to build faster. They know they want to build with fewer people. And they found a partner in Hickory to come up with that solution. They've really defined the problem. Next thing, you've got to do your initial project. And I hate to use the word pilot because this industry is killed by serious pilot projects, everyone being different. It's a bit like using Iyad's model of the Volkswagens. Every time you buy a new vehicle, you have something slightly different, an extra wheel, a new window, another door. It's crazy. What we need to do is set the roadmap and build on that. We need to then repeat the solution to make sure that it is, you get the costs beginning to drop out. One of the things that we've learnt in setting up two of the UK's leading manufacturers from a volumetric solution is that there is a universal truth that 40% of the cost drops out as you learn your process, you refine your process, and you industrialize the angle. So this then comes to the area of once you've had a chance to do at scale, you industrialize, scale and grow and repeat. And as I think Michael's showing now with the translation of the Hickory product from Australia to Southeast Asia and now to the UK, once you've got a stable solution, you can build on it and take it elsewhere. So to kind of wrap up and try and remind you of what we've talked through in the final slide, the key issues for the future of construction, you need to be outcome led. What is it we're trying to achieve rather than going for manufactured solutions just because they're fashionable? You want to create the ecosystem, find the right partners, find people who share your values and DNA, who have a passion for building what you build and want to be your partners to make that happen. And then industrialize. It's going to require investment. You're going to have to put some skin in the game to make it work because there is no quick fix. And in this industry, we need to find people who are open to collaboration and whole systems thinking. It's not the way everybody works. We're up for it. If you want to carry on going into the world of litigation and arguing over variations, etc., in the traditional world of construction, you're welcome to it. We're looking to find partners who want to work in the world of advanced manufactured construction. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Tim. And I love that statement. We're up for it. Definitely are. So our next panelist is Alex Hyams. He's a partner at Alinea Consulting. Has 17 years of industry experience in the resi, retail, and master planning sectors. With Alinea, Alex leads the resi sector as part of the Build Off-Site Residential Hub Leadership Group, which advocates for modern methods of constructions. Alex is also currently involved in several high-profile modular projects in the UK. So Alex, what do you have to say?
Hi, Shonn. Hello to everyone listening. I think it's great that off-site technologies are gaining more traction, not just in the UK, but around the world. But I think there still exists an education gap to bridge in the industry. And I think to get everyone up to speed with what the real benefits and considerations are in actually delivering an off-site project, and having done a couple now, just understanding the nuances in terms of change control, design, it's just getting everyone up to speed. And I think it's incumbent on everyone, that be contractors, suppliers, consultants, to collaborate and really kind of what we're doing here, kind of put live case studies out there so people can learn and kind of it demystifies it for them and gives them a bit more of an understanding about what it could mean for their project. So I mean, you've probably seen and heard a lot of the industry buzzwords that are at the top, and I like to try and break it down in terms of you've got your off-site componentization, which is probably the most common, that's been around the most, the likes of the bathroom pods, the unitized facades, package risers. And then you've got the panel systems, the likes of the precast systems, CLT, SIP, sort of structurally insulated panels. And then taking it the next step further, you kind of fuse those two together, and then you get the likes of the Hickory system, the Mace Tech systems, and what Argyrou are doing. And then the kind of final step in terms of putting that together would be like the volumetrics. So, for example, we're working with Tide and Vision Modular in the UK, who've just completed the tallest volumetric tower in Croydon at 42 stories. I mean, clearly, obviously, the more that you adopt off-site technologies and the more that you kind of work through that chain, the greater the benefits are. So those benefits listed below that I'm sure you've heard quite a lot, the speed, productivity, program, safety, sustainability. And I think it's important that where there's lots of metrics and numbers thrown out there, it's important to understand what route and which one can actually kind of lock down a certain figure, because I think it's dangerous that sometimes there's numbers put out there and they don't necessarily relate to each type of technology. So that comes back to that education piece again. Next slide, please. Sorry, next slide. So, I mean, I've mentioned that there needs to be an education bridge, and that the benefits do certainly exist. So why is there not more an uptake? And I think I've listed 5 there, but to me, the 2 main ones, certainly in the UK, are the cost and competition, and they're very much interlinked. So, and when I'm talking about cost, I'm talking about capital construction cost, because clearly from an overall viability point of view, when you put in program and design periods, it's been proven to work. So I think, but the capital construction cost is still something in most instances at the moment is higher than traditional. I mean, it'd be wrong for me to not throw some numbers out as a QS in terms of what we're seeing in the UK, but broadly for a kind of fully integrated DFMA product, we're seeing kind of +1 to 3% over traditional on construction costs, but kind of 10 to 15% program savings. And then in the volumetric world, probably 5 to 15% over, but with a 30 to 40% program saving. And again, it's important to understand the nuances of those, but that's kind of broadly what we've seen on the projects that we've delivered. But then why are the costs are high? I mean, as Michael's already mentioned, it's not cheap to buy, set up and run a factory, and it's critical for utilisation to be high in those factories to get the cost down. And without the throughput of orders, because of the kind of infancy of the market at the moment, it's hard for manufacturers to get their cost base down, because they need to build in an element of risk to offset the downturns in manufacturing. So it's a bit of a kind of chicken and egg situation. Unless they get pipeline to be able to deliver, then they can't get their cost base down. And then but kind of finally, that kind of leads into competition, because it's so costly and risky to enter into the market. In the UK, if you took the volumetric industry, there's probably only 1 or 2 guys who've got the covenant and expertise to build a tower. And then probably from a DFMA perspective, a similar number. So it's very difficult to advocate to clients going down a route that doesn't have as much competition. And this lack of competition obviously keeps prices high as well. And it does the job of kind of scaring investors and clients to think that if something did go wrong, there is no plan B, where traditional, there's a lot more people to step into place. I mean, picking up the other 3, I mean, I think they've got a lesser impact. Funding, I think that there's always been a kind of misconception that going off-site involves a large kind of upfront deposit payment. And yes, okay, the cash flows are slightly different, but they're not fundamentally different than traditional, but that should be an issue, and that's not what we've seen. And accreditations like BOPAS and other accreditations means that the mortgageability and warranty issues shouldn't exist. Public perception is one that's been mentioned earlier, with the kind of 1950s post-war prefabs have probably done nothing to kind of help an off-site kind of negative stigma. But I think if we were to take anyone round a finished DFMA or volumetric project that we finished in the last few years, I think they'd be hard pressed to know that they were in an off-site project. There's no drop off in quality. So I think that's another education piece. Once there's more of these buildings open, people can go look and feel, and then they understand that there isn't a drop off in quality. And then finally, design and flexibility, a question that comes up quite a bit. And I think every good piece of design, every building, there are a set of rules and constraints to every site. So I think, yes, there is certain constraints with certain technologies, but the best designers will find a way and are already finding ways to circumvent that. So I wouldn't see that as an issue. I think there probably needs to be an element of more standardization, certainly from a chassis point of view. And I think that's what Michael was talking about, in terms of you can standardize the chassis, but you can still wrap the building in something different. You can still put different bathroom pods. So an element of standardization will bring in more of an element of the ability to compete, very much like the car industry does. Same chassis, but very different looking cars, exactly what Iyad was saying earlier. So in conclusion, and similar to what Tim was saying, it's not And I said volumetric, it's not one size fits all. I think that's very much offsite. It's not one size fits all. What's your drivers? Is it cost, time, quality, or is it all of them? So you can see why elements that have needed speed, such as student housing, have really taken off, whereas others, in terms of the prime resi developers, they're a little bit kind of behind the curve. But it's not to say with the likes of Berkeley Homes now in the UK that they're tapping into that. So, I mean, in conclusion, I think I can't stress enough how much the kind of collaboration piece is important for people to share case studies, to take people around buildings, to kind of bridge that education gap. And I kind of left it with some of my pondering thoughts around where I think the future may be in terms of more DFMA style offerings rather than the volumetric, and is vertical integration, is that the way to go? The likes of L&G in the UK, who have kind of been the masters of their own destiny. So I'll be happy to answer any of those if we get an opportunity. So yeah, thanks for listening.
Great, thanks, Alex. And I mean, really strong messages there around education and collaboration. Completely agree with that. All right, and last but definitely not least is Rose Nguan, Director of the Building Control Authority of Singapore. Now, the BCA is a government agency under the Ministry of National Development, whose mission is to shape a safe, quality, sustainable, and friendly built environment. The agency also promotes construction productivity and champions the construction industry's transformation map. The Singapore government and the BCA are now one of the world's leading public advocates for modular construction. And I'm really thrilled to hear what Rose has to share with us today. So Rose, please take it away.
Hi, thanks for the introduction. Yeah, the good things about being the last speaker is I can speak less because my other colleagues have covered all the other topics on modular construction. Yeah, I'm Rose from Singapore. Next slide. Okay, DFMA involves shifting the on-site construction work to off-site fabrications in a factory. Yes, in Singapore, we have the low-cost foreign workforce, and that's why it makes construction cheaper, but at the same time, it is more difficult for us to convince the industry to adopt DFMA. And the reason why we want DFMA is because we can have better quality, better safety, and with fewer workers on site, site safety, faster construction, fewer delivery trips, better quality control, and less dust and noise to the neighborhood. So we can see that there are plenty of benefits. That's the reason why we still want to push for DFMA, even that is being more costly. Okay, next slide. Next. Okay, the DFMA continuum is actually a suite of different technologies that we promote. So it is not just the fully integrated assemblies. We also encourage the use of single components or sub-assemblies, like for the mechanical, electrical, plumbing system, which is sub-assembly done in the factories, and you bring the module to the site. Okay, and also we include the use of fully integrated assemblies, which just now many of my other speakers have actually shared. Yeah, in Singapore we call them PPVC, the prefabricated prefinished volumetric construction. And this PPVC is the latest initiative that we are working on, because it can offer the highest manpower saving. From what we see from some of the initial projects, the savings is up to about 40% at the project level. Next slide. So how do we do that? Okay, we identify the broad strategies to build a robust DFMA ecosystem. So they are to generate the lead demand, which is critical to sustain the DFM adoption. Secondly, we also want to build the supply capacity and capabilities, which is important to create the economies of scale and competition. So these strategies will come together, which hopefully that will result in a lower cost premium of the DFMA technologies. So let me show you in the next two slides. So how do we do this specific initiative? to promote the use of DFMA. The next slide. Yes, to create the lead demand, we have the public sector to take the lead, with the government agencies adopting the various DFMA technologies in the project. The GPEs, the government procuring entities, would adopt this DFMA into their projects. And we actually look into different types of technologies that are suitable for the different construction projects. For residentials, we will promote the use of a prefabricated pre-finished module. Like for commercial or institutional projects and the industrial projects, we encourage the use of prefab MEP. On the private end, on the private sector, those projects that is under the government land sales program, they are required to adopt DFMA as well. And some of these residential projects, they come in with the PBU requirements, the prefab bathroom units. And there are some projects who has mandatory to adopt PVVC in the projects. So with this, we see more and more success stories that has been completed over the last 2-3 years. And besides having this demand, yeah, we are looking also on supply capabilities. Okay, so we actually have quite a few of these precasters who build multi-story prefabrication factories. Okay, so some of these are like Zhongxing Straits, Team Build, Soil Build. So these are the multi-story prefabrication hub. Because in Singapore, actually land scarce, so we have to build taller. So even for precast factories, it has to go multi-stories, okay, to optimize the use of build land space. Yeah, so we are building this supply capability. So with a smaller footprint, we are hoping that they can actually generate the bigger output. Yeah. So besides this, we also looking into the quality of the supplies. Okay, so we have accreditation scheme. We get we work with the association to conduct accreditations for the PVVC system, the PBU system, and even the prefab MEP system. By doing this, we can give more assurance to the developers that the system that they are adopting in the projects are of better quality. So finally, we will continue to change the way we build by looking into supply, looking into the demand, and encourage the industry to adopt DFMA. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Rose. And I mean, it is an amazing story. You know, Singapore and the BCA have changed the way we build, and it's catching on around the world. So, all right. So, Chaz, I think you can turn the presentation off or go to the main slide. That's great. We're now getting to my favorite part of the hour, and we had some really great introductions. So, I'm going to start opening up questions to the panelists. And for those of you listening in the audience, please have some questions ready so we can bring those in a minute. So, I'd like to start with Rose first, actually. So, Rose, you know, this, like we said, the story of Singapore and the BCA, amazing success over the past 5 years, going from since I've been here, just to see how much progress you've made. And I'd just love to hear, and I'm sure there are people in the audience that would, what do you think are the key ingredients of that success that you've achieved?
Well, unfortunately, you know, the government have to come in to take the lead. So, and of course, I think some of you also know that we have this buildability. So again, legislation. So the government have to come in to actually pave the way to slowly guide the industry. Yeah. So the success story is top down. It has to be from the top down. So with this, we actually see that site productivity increase. Yeah, the adoption rate for DFMA also has increased over the years.
All right, that's really great. So government intervention. I guess I'll pass that I'd like to hear maybe from Alex. Alex, what do you think is the role of government in helping, you know, implement this type of construction, say in the UK?
I mean, I think in the UK, I mean, there probably could be a lot more that could be done. Certainly in the public sector. I'm never a great advocate of mandating things, because I find when things are mandated, it tends to kind of at the start stifle a little bit of creativity and productivity. I think potentially something like what was done with the likes of photovoltaic cells in the UK, where there was a subsidy for their use, and whether there's an incentive. I prefer an incentivization scheme to get manufacturers involved, rather than mandating that every project has to have an amount of offsite. I mean, that can come, but I think you need to kind of gain a bit of momentum first, because I think it is true still that there's lots of good technologies out there, and certainly in the UK, but their adoption, it's still, I think it comes back to that education process. There's still a long way to go to get everyone up to speed of what's out there.
Good answer, Alex. I guess kind of tentative government intervention, but not so much to stifle innovation. Yeah. Next question I had was for you, Michael, and it is on the kind of innovation story. So you've had an amazing journey over a decade and even longer. And I know there's many listening to the event today that are just starting on that journey, or trying to learn, you know, how do they start to change the way they build. And I was wondering if you could kind of think back to yourself maybe 20 years ago, and if you could pass a few, you know, sage words of advice to yourself, you know, on how to get started and succeed on this journey, what would it be?
Don't do it. Oh, mate, there's, you know, survival's a difficult thing, and surviving, you know, those sorts of learnings and expensive lessons in life are a difficult thing. The journey is a tale of disaster, and that's essentially our journey. And but you know, as you take stock, you look at yourself, and we look at ourselves today, and we say, okay, yes, we've left a trail of mistakes on the way, but here we are now, and it's positive now. But it's taken a long time to get there. And I remember collaborating with the BCA in Singapore, you know, 8, 9, 10 years ago, and hosting them whilst they were on multiple study tours at our UB factory, and they were, you know, doing their investigation about, you know, whether to adopt what do they call PC. You know, prefab over there, and ultimately they went through that journey and did it their way, and that is an approach that is working for Singapore, and I credit the Singapore government for taking the world lead in that regard. And you know, I'm thankful that we could have been, we're a part of their learning process, and they did it without having to go through the expensive education that we've had. What I am interested in actually is quite enlightening is just to hear the other panelists actually, and it's interesting to hear that there is so much knowledge about prefab, and quite frankly, honestly, each of the panelists here have nailed, you know, the subject matter. They're all very well aware and on point about each of the items within prefab, and you know, Alex's numbers are spot on in his time savings, and Iyad's presentation was spot on in terms of prefab. So, you know, well done to all the panelists on really understanding what prefab's about. And so clearly there's a lot of ways of learning about what prefab is about and modular is about. We've had our journey, and we're just builders, right? So we like to just do things before we think about them. Whereas the rest of the panelists seem to think about them before they do them, but ultimately we've ended at the same point with lots of knowledge about prefab. So, you know, I've learnt that we could have taken another route that would have been less expensive.
So it sounds like the lesson you have for yourself is get ready for some pain, but keep going, it'll get better.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's really good. Well, let's hear from some people that we know are big thinkers. So, Iyad, I'd love to hear from you. You know, I think some of the schemes that you're working on, it's very interesting around your thoughts on the role of modular construction and sustainability and circular economy. Can you share with us your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, for me, one of the main challenges that we have is the lack of knowledge of our own crew, our own architect with issue related to prefabrication and modularity. You know, the academic qualification of people, academia in general, university, the education does not offer anything about it, which obviously make a job like Michael's job much, much harder, you know, because obviously he has to do the investment. If you think about the car industry, for example, the car industry through the last century did tremendous investment of how to shift their manufacturing. You know, when you go, you as a car designer, you design based on modularity, you design based on that principles. Architecture education doesn't offer the same. So one of the first struggle we had to do is to educate our people, you know, to go in that direction and to build that mindset. You know? So that's one of the the main obstacle that we have. You know, and then every time we get a free range of new architecture on FS, we have to redo the education again. So I would say academia have a role to intervene right now, especially under the new current circumstances. The other aspect that we are struggled with is how to survive or how to introduce this system in different markets. So for example, as you know well, in the UAE, all the labor are imported. So for them, for the authority, is actually quite strategic to reduce labor, because labor in a place like the Gulf region is a liability. But then when we started pushing the same in South Asia and places like Egypt also and North Africa, you know, the social impact of trying to cut jobs was tremendous. So they're very reluctant, the developer, and the government authority for that sake, because again, it has a social impact. You would cut down the jobs by 50%. So there is all kind of dynamics. And also our profession, we're not like cars. We continue to introduce investigation in the architecture design process all the way to the site. You know, we decide on color samples, on facade when we are on site. So you're talking about almost 2 years from the design process. Here you are coming to a client and telling him within the first 3 months, you have almost to decide in every nut and shell and tile and glass color. So it's a completely kind of also change of how to engage with client, of also how to design with client, which is also extremely difficult. And it is something you cannot, once you trigger the approvals at these early stages of the design, you cannot go back on site and decide otherwise, because it's done, it's built, it's fixed. You know, you've seen, you know, the bathroom is delivered just like this, you know, everything is delivered just like this. So there is a lot of issues that need to be dealt with, not only from, in my opinion, on the design aspect, but also even psychological aspect. You have to kind of deal with it with client. And you know, I mean, the mad thing about this profession, the building profession really, is that people keep repeating the same thing again and again and anticipating there will be different results, you know, by hiring program managers, planning managers, but actually today, the latest statistic, you know, only 30% of projects achieve programs. You know, so you have 70% of projects cannot even get to kind of the initial planning they have. No, we're not talking only about design process. No, and the last point I want to make is that, you know, the building and the design and the architecture, building industry is a very slow profession, but the dynamic of the market today change every 1 or 2 years. The developer change their minds, you know, after 1 year or 2 years. You know, you cannot predict market for the next 2-3 years, any kind of market. So, but any building have a cycle of 3-4 years. So it's important really the modularity if you manage to cut down the timing in half, you also allow better prediction, you know, for developers, you know.
Wow, yeah, that's an amazing response. A lot of great stuff in there. I think there's one of the particular topics I'd like to maybe ask some of the other panelists is really around the, you know, the regional response of prefabrication and modular and the social aspects. And Tim, I know you've been working out in Hong Kong with us, and I think you had the experience of, you know, seeing the UK adopt it and then now trying to move some of that knowledge over into Hong Kong. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience over there?
Yeah, well, I'll start with maybe answering one of the questions you asked of Alex earlier in terms of the role of government. One of the things that I really liked in the UK was the UK didn't mandate off-site or manufactured construction. They basically set a presumption in favour of, and that was a great vision, but unfortunately didn't deliver through. So that told the industry that this is the way forward, this is the way we should be going, we should be exploring this idea. What it should have then done is used government as a serial client, a repeat client, building lots of schools, lots of hospitals, lots of government buildings. Should have then said, unless you can justify otherwise, you should be using an off-site solution, because we know that after 3 repetitive solutions of a similar product, the cost comes down, the efficiency goes up, and people like Michael say, wow, fantastic, finally a client that's actually made their mind up about what they want. So that's one of the things we initially right, but didn't follow through. So that's something I've been working with the Hong Kong SAR in terms of they wanted to play catch up with Singapore. There's that rivalry between Hong Kong and Singapore, and Hong Kong didn't want to be left behind. And so they came to the UK to kind of they came to the UK rather than copying their neighbours, wanted to kind of come and see what we should do. So I've suggested to Hong Kong is that what they need to do is to think out again, why does the Hong Kong government want offsite? And some of it is very similar to the labour issues that Singapore faces. The last thing you want to do is have coach loads of very low skilled workers shipping in on a daily basis. But equally, it's a case of how do we get the maximum for Hong Kong out of industrialising the process? Does Hong Kong want to basically ship in everything from externally, or does it want to add value locally? So is it the engineering, design and architecture that's done locally and we subcontract everything to mainland China? Is that the way the world's going to operate? I think in the last 6 months we've seen that there are some challenges if that's the way we rely on the world operating, both economically and socially. So I think we do need to look at the ecosystem at multiple levels. You look at within a bathroom pod, you look at the detail of how the components go together, how that component fits into the floor, how that floor fits into a building, how that building fits into the local landscape. And then you've got to think about the value chain of engineering, design and supply. So it is complicated, and it's not a case of you just go down to your corner store and say, see that 46-story building? I'll have one of those, thank you. You've got to invest the time to work out what that value chain needs to be.
Good answer. So guys, we're kind of running a bit tight on time. I hope you don't mind. Maybe we'll stay on for another few minutes. I just thought we'd get some questions from the audience. And there's one, and what I'll do is I'll read out a few that were on the chat and then just leave it open to the panelists if one of you want to take that, or even multiple of you. So the first one, and this is very timely, is basically with the recent pandemic, we've seen a lot of reports that the social distancing requirements are starting to really impact productivity on sites. And I was just curious, you know, what's some of the advice that you could give to your, you know, other people in the industry, to what can they do to try to adapt to this new reality? And open to the panelists, who would like to take that one? No one's putting their hand up.
Sorry, Shonn, can you just, the first part of the question again?
Yeah, Michael, and actually, I think this is a good one for you, so thanks for volunteering. It's basically around, you know, we're seeing with the pandemic and the new regulations that they're not allowing as many workers on site, and there's a lot of additional bureaucracy and admin. So it's really impacting productivity. And I guess the question is, what kind of advice would we give to, you know, your traditional contractor? How are we going to adapt to this new reality?
Look, certainly prefab has a part to play there. I mean, we've got direct experience with that now. So, I mean, what we're dealing with here in Melbourne, Victoria, is that on Monday, the government announced that we need to reduce our labour force on construction sites by 75%.
Wow.
to traditional. It's extraordinary. It's ridiculous, and I
How
mean,
did they come up with that number?
it's an arbitrary number, and I think it was flippant and ill-founded. But anyway, we need to deal with it. I mean, it makes me sick even just to say it, quite frankly, but we have to do this. So this is what we're confronting right now. We've got a couple of prefab sites, modular sites that we're using our system on. They already comply immediately with that new regulation. So, I mean, that's fantastic. And the other live example that I can point to in relation to that question, mate, is with Mace in London, our NO6 project there. You know, they've obviously, Mace are a large contractor in the UK. They've got plenty of conventional projects, and they've just compared the productivity between their conventional projects and their NO6 during that COVID shutdown. With NO6, they were able to manufacture off-site whilst they were in shutdown. So they had a lot more success on NO6 than their conventional projects, and a lot less impact as a result of COVID. So there are genuinely less people on site, and their factories were able to work during the shutdown. So they've done more.
Thanks, Michael. That's going to be a real challenge for you. You know, see. Who would like to take maybe respond to that as well?
Yeah. For Singapore, it's the same that you know, when we want to have zoning separations, segregation, so that the workers do not intermix. So by having off-site construction, probably half of the workers will be shifted away to off-site. So these people will not mix with those that's on-site. So actually it promotes or reduce the intermixing between workers. So we see it as a good thing, and that's the way that we are actually encouraging more of the DFMA. With this pandemic, all the more we should do it offsite.
Totally agree, Rose. So if you don't mind, I'll do one more of the written questions, and then maybe we'll open it up to the wider audience. This one's kind of interesting, and it comes up a lot, and I'm sure you'll have an opinion on it. This is often future purchasers like to reconfigure layouts, such as kitchens, larger open plan, reshuffle bathrooms, increase walk-in wardrobes. Now, how do we address that in the prefabrication industry? Because, you know, a lot of times you hear modular is great, but you can't really change anything. Anyone want to pick that one up? Iyad?
So part of the project that we have designed, as you know, Shonn, it was a residential project, and we thought about the project in a different way. We thought about the residential place as SML, small, medium, large, and we defined something called fixed, you know, program, like for example, all the weight area, and then the bedroom, the living room, all are flexible. In other words, what you get like a loft, and then we designed actually smart furniture that have the doors inside them, the bed inside them, all kind of component that you actually have. It's a movable partition that more or less take a space of, let's say, 90 square meter and make it a large one bedroom, or make it 2 bedrooms. You know, so it's a kind of mix between modular construction but also smart furniture. You know, and instead of saying I have a 1 and 2 and a 3 bedroom, you can literally order an apartment of 90 square meter and order 1 unit of smart furniture that has all your doors, again, all your furniture. I mean, you need to kill the bedroom. Why do you need a bedroom? You only kind of sleep in a bedroom, no? So you can literally fold up your bedroom, push that wall, and have a living room of 90 square meter rather than put yourself in a square meter. So, you know, I think creativity has no limit. And once you start thinking about these elements, you know, there is kind of endless way of dealing with it. But what I talked about right now is something, Shonn, you've seen it yourself, no? I mean, our client is extremely excited about it, obviously, because it's just a new way of thinking also about living quarters.
Great answer, and I love, you know, creativity has no limits. So who would like to maybe do a response to that?
Cool. Shonn, if that's good. Yeah, one of the interesting things from our perspective is we talk about DFMA, design for manufacture and assembly, and that makes the manufacturer and the assembler's job easy because you're designing it for their purposes. We use a process which we widen that. We call it DFX, and we put all of the requirements, all of the things that we're looking to achieve in that X. So it could be, as Iyad says, designed for flexibility of the layout. It could be designed for 0 people or minimal people on site because that suits our security issues or our social distancing. And we need to put all of those things in up front. And the last thing you want to do is to kind of get to the stage of you've just gone into contract, you've got fixed prices, etc. And then you put in other preconditions about we need it more flexible, we want to change our design layouts. So it's being really clear about what kind of added bits that you want at day one. I try and avoid using the car analogies, but we've used a few between us on the call today. So if you think about, if you want to buy a car now, you go online and you use a configurator and you look at the implications of having leather trim or a big sunshine roof or some larger engine. You understand the implications of that decision before you start, rather than rather than getting to the 14th story of an apartment block and saying, could you move that wall now? Would you like to move that elevator shaft for me? All of those things just add hideous amounts of cost to the construction process. So the great thing about doing this is using what we call our right to left process, where we sit down from day one with the client, with the contractor. How do we get the optimal balance of speed, specification, flexibility, and cost between the design group?
Great. And so, Tim, that was called DFX, was it?
So we widened DFMA to DFX, and X has got lots of dots against it, or X1, X2, depending how mathematically you want to be. And the first thing to do is to sit down at that real conceptual design brief. What would be really valuable? And one of the things we're finding most valuable now with residential people who are landlords is design for maintenance, because their biggest cost is when somebody wants the apartment refurbished. We've got to change the bathroom. If you want to spend $400,000 replacing a bathroom because it was all put in and welded to the side of the building, actually having a bathroom pod which is absolutely fixed may not be ideal. But if Michael knows that it needs to be refurbished in 5 years, his design team can come up with a solution that means plug and play shower unit, change the tiles. If we know what we need to change and maintain, then we've got a better solution. So those are the kind of factors we want to get in. DFX is the way forward.
Great, Tim. So we're running kind of short on time, so I'm going to say maybe let's have one question from the audience. So Shazlin, are you able to find us who's our lucky attendee who's going to get to speak today?
Yes, I have one. His name is Ricardo Pedroni. Please introduce yourself and ask a question. Go ahead, Ricardo.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you now. Yeah.
This is Ricardo from Ramboll, Copenhagen. Thanks everyone for the presentation. It was super interesting. Something that we probably haven't mentioned yet on modular, or we haven't touched on your presentation, was around demolition. So particularly for high-rise buildings, we don't generally talk much about that. Have your designs, have your strategies accounted for demolition? Do we have some cool insight that you can share?
Ricardo, is there anyone that you'd like to direct the question to?
I would say that Michael would be the most the easiest idea, but it can be open to anyone. Rose maybe has got some experience in Singapore, or there is some plan put in place by the BCA.
Look, Ricardo, the demolition question actually was asked quite a lot of that was asked of us in the early days when we were doing unitized building, and in those days that was a roll form steel. Monocoque structure with some steel columns that were bolted together, and we used to say, yeah, you could just unbolt it and you remove the building or dismantle the building instead of just demolishing the building. And theoretically that was possible, not that practical, but possible. And I've got to say we've moved on from that because it was a very unlikely occurrence. Our current system is a concrete structure. Whilst it is bolted together, it would be very difficult to demolish. I mean, they're not designed to be demolished. It would be demolished in a fairly similar way to a conventional building.
Thanks, Michael. Who would like to pick up on that?
Yeah, without wishing to fall out with my my new colleague in Melbourne, one of the things I think we're going to be challenged on is on the sustainability angle is wet concrete in particular is going to be something that is going to be frowned upon as we go forward. And I know that a lot of Asia Pacific is wedded to concrete, but we're going to need to start thinking about the reduction in it. If we can find ways of reusing Michael's precast panels, I think we may be pushed down that route. And again, if we revert to my previous answer, as we come back to the DFX, designed for dismantleability rather than designed for demolition. Again, coming back to our car analogies, BMW have to show a chain of custody for every component in their car. How do you recycle a tire? How do you recycle a gearbox? What do you do with these plastic components? They said it was impossible. The electronics company said it was impossible, but it was mandated centrally. And so it is going to come. The construction industry may be a few hundred years behind everybody else, but it's going to come to this manufacturing industry too.
Great, Tim. Anyone want a last word on that? Iyad, you've got some really good thinking on this.
Yeah, I mean, our experience working with Dutch modular manufacturers here is actually when it comes to not demolition, but actually it takes the building to something completely different. It's a building second life, you know. So it goes in 2 dimensions. So because it's all light construction, as Tim said, so it's designed as a light construction. And actually, for example, it was designed, we have a modular school that it was relocated 3 times, you know, so you literally take the butts, you know, refurnish, take them to the factory, refurnish them and bring them back, you know, to a different location and a different configuration. So you use some of the butts or you don't use the other butts. You can really unblock the elevation and bring a new elevation in, you know, so it's actually already there. It's a matter of, as Tim said, from the beginning, is thinking about that process and then implement it by designing this part on that basis. So it's this system that we use, it's a hybrid system between steel and concrete itself, you know, and it's pretty successful almost for the last 5 years. There's actually this specific manufacturer, for example, have a lot of butts sitting in their yards, and it was used to house a lot of refugees for the last 2-3 years in Germany. You know, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of butts, you know, that it was literally reconfigured, reshaped, and used for housing refugees that came to Germany, you know. So it's possible, it's not only possible, it's done already, it's there.
That's a really great point to end on, is the kind of sustainability and what is the second life of our building. So I'm afraid we're out of time, guys, and I think we could have easily done 2 hours on this. So just want to thank you everyone for joining. Hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. Really learned a lot, and thank you for our panelists. I'd encourage all of you on the line to reach out to our panelists for more information, because I'm sure they would love to hear from you and share more of their experiences. So Shaz, can you put up the last slide? I just want to do a shameless plug for our next event, which will be in November. And it's called the Post-Crisis City. Is that coming up, Shaz? Wait, here we go. Anyway, we have our annual conference, and we're doing a new concept this year for obvious reasons. We're not going to do the big 2,000 person event that we were hoping for in Singapore this year. It's actually going to be a 3-city conference where we'll be hosting live participants in Singapore, London, and Chicago simultaneously for practically a 24-hour period. And we'll also have the kind of web event in parallel with that. So please check it out if you haven't seen it. But anyway, thanks again, everyone, for listening in on the future of construction. And please, send a note of thanks to our panelists. Have a great day.